Yes, this music gets me every time. G'day, chat. Nice of you to join us. It's a team radio podcast. We didn't think it was going to be a team radio podcast, but because of a lot of things that happened, it's ended up being a team radio podcast. But it's all right. We have plenty of questions to get through from the last couple of episodes where we've missed, and also from questions that you've asked over Discord and over Instagram. So a massive thank you to you for doing that. Boys, how's your day? Tommy T, you doing okay?
Good day.
Happy to be here with chat, aren't you?
Yeah.
So's Campy. Campy, aren't you?
Hello, chat. How are you? Are you well?
John Paul, hello there, mate. Good of you to join us. And
What
look,
is happening?
It's a bit of freedom here in Sydney, and you guys get a bit of freedom Thursday night as well. I look forward to both of you, of course, going out for midnight shopping. Campy to the beanie store to get his current beanie in
Just
another
new one.
That's just 17 more of the current beanies, right?
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
3, they're on rotation.
Single-use beanie. You just
Single-use
Just-
beanie.
All right, well, Chad,
very
thanks for being
good.
here. Let's get into it, lads, shall we? Both ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello there, my name is James Baldwin, and welcome to another episode of Lakeside Drive's F1 podcast. In this episode, it's Team Radio episode 3, and I'm joined by my friends and yours, the two Thomases. Tommy T, g'day mate.
G'day, how you doing?
And the bloke who didn't do his homework, Campy.
Gentlemen,
Here's the bus.
look, I'm
As
not.
we get put on notice.
I'm not wearing that. I did my homework. I was subscribed to F1 TV Pro last night at 10 o'clock when I got home and watched the race. Broke curfew. I had to. I was doing some stuff. So, yeah, but I watched it last night as if it was the normal Grand Prix weekend. So, you guys didn't do your homework, clearly. That's why we're not doing the race review.
The bigger issue is giving everyone else an opportunity to watch the race as well. And when you get
not
like
just
messages
us.
3 o'clock in the afternoon, have you guys watched the race yet? No, because we don't know where to find it. Part of your job is to find it for us. You're like, figure it out tonight. Tommy T's in bed going, nope. Can't
Yeah, I gotta
do.
get up in like 5 hours, mate. There's no chance.
Anyway, look,
Oh.
it doesn't matter. It
I was
doesn't matter,
up.
boys, because there's so many questions here. There's so many good questions, and of course, we have the US Grand Prix to look forward to this coming weekend. We also have Mazzano Take 2 for MotoGP and Extreme E Island X3. So it's going to be one of those dumb weekends for me where I do too many podcasts, but I cannot wait for the US Grand Prix. Tommy T, you watching it live in the roastery again?
I think we might actually.
6 o'clock start. You guys
That's
do it.
that's a vibe actually. Yeah, we're doing that.
It was my favourite race, I think, to watch with both of you last year.
Yeah.
The year before, maybe. Sorry, the year before. Where we sat and took over the screen in Common Folk Roasters like everyone else can get out of
Shush
the way.
customers who are watching F1. Just
Shut up.
Yeah, we're watching Hamilton win again. That's all right. Look, thank you to you for watching and listening wherever you are with this podcast. A massive shout out to you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. I keep banging on about it, but more of you keep doing it, and I'm super appreciative of it. As you know, we are serving the algorithm. We're not far off getting to 1,000 subs by the end of the year. We're about 563 now, so genuinely appreciate that. Thank you so much. Shout out to our Discord server, of course. It still goes on. Even though there's no racing, there's still plenty of conversations going on. If you haven't yet joined that, please jump across to do that. You can find the link in the description below if you're watching or listening, both in the same spot. Same with our Instagram as well. Look, boys, before we get into questions about us and the sort of Ask Me Anything vibe of Team Radio, I want to bring up Johnny Herbert, because this week he came out, or last week I should say, he came out and just was no good about Daniel Ricciardo. And look, as far as I'm concerned, he, Damon Hill, and others are in the bin. At least Damon won a World Drivers' Championship. Campy, can you please give me your whole thoughts on one Johnny Herbert?
Oh, Johnny Herbert, you know what, mate? I've got as many World Drivers' Championships as you do. Absolutely zero, mate. You are... look, I can understand the criticism of him, but to come out and say that his talent's just evaporated and it's happened because he's 32, mate, you're a dickhead, Brit, and we hate you at the moment. all of you when it comes to F1 because you're so Lando Norris and George Russell focused. You're like, it's the second coming of Christ for Formula One. And hey, you guys are full of shit. The time will prove that you're not that good. There's better drivers out there. And I can tell you what, you're all going to be eating humble pie that I'm going to cook for you next year when Danny Rick absolutely spanks Lando. Lando's come out and said, yeah, I don't like the car the way it drives next year. It's tricky. Danny Rick, he's going, I've done this the last 3 years, adapted and changed the cars. I know how to adapt driving styles. He's going to get into that thing and absolutely romp it home. He'll still get another win this year. It's going to happen. And at the end of the year, he might not be beating Lando in the points department throughout the whole year. But we're going to sit back and we're going to go, Danny Rick got 2 wins in that car and Lando Norris did absolutely nothing. Therefore, he automatically had a better year. Now, Herbert, shut your mouth, chin up. I hope Score sacks you.
I have nothing to add. That was perfect.
You
Probably the
dickhead.
best rant you've done. There it is.
That was great.
Seriously.
What was he provoked? Why did he decide to come out and just go on an all-out assault on Daniel? What did
They're
he
not. They're not even comments that you need to make. We all know that he hasn't had the greatest year, but he's had a win. And he's getting better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the races since that win, I mean, haven't gone McLaren's way. I mean, he got a good result in Russia and last weekend in Turkey when it was wet. I mean, track conditions. I mean, Lando wasn't even quick. So, but you need to look at the positives and not just the positives. I can understand people being critical, but to come out and say that his talent's evaporated, you absolute. Like, it's not necessary. It's not needed. And if I'm Danny Rick, I'm just like, next time he asks a question, I'm going, mate. Yeah.
It's good. Thank you for keeping it PG.
Yeah.
Appreciate it for the live stream.
He was going to unleash, wasn't he?
Tommy T, I listened to yet another podcast interview with Daniel Ricciardo this week, another Australian podcast. They're not a Formula One based podcast, but they are a motorsport podcast. I won't bother mentioning the names. I'll do you a favor in not getting anyone to listen to it because it wasn't that good, although the names indicate that it should have been better than it was. Anyway, it was a Daniel Ricciardo interview. It was useless yet again. But one of the key points that came out of it for me was Daniel saying, you know, you don't pay attention to the press as much as you can because whilst it's an important part of Formula One to have media like us, and for whatever reason we form part of that.
We're not media.
Well, we form part of the circus in a lot of ways, and we're with, as you say, armchair experts, the couch callers that like to see how it is. And look, we've got a following at some point. If you've been with us from the beginning, or even if you've just been with us since Daniel's win at Monza, it is great to have you here. And of course, a lot of the reason is because we try to give everyone a fair shot of either being in or out of the bin. That's just the measure of how we have it.
Yep.
But Daniel, you know, he hasn't really had the greatest years. And as he said, he's been able to, the greatest year, he's been able to sort of shirk the negative media attention for pretty much all of his career up until this point. And it was actually an interesting point because I thought, there hasn't actually been a time, even with his Renault change, even when his start in Renault 2019 and the front wing came off the car because of that stupid service road that I'm sure Dan Andrews put there himself, ripped off the front wing of his car. It didn't matter. The media still loved him. But because now for the first time he's up against a British driver in Lando Norris, suddenly there is an opportunity, isn't there, for that kind of attention. Look, he said, the reason why I said I never left was twofold. A, for me, and sort of, you know, self-motivation, but B, for all of the questions that will come, which is, did you know you're going to win? How do you feel about it? All that sort of other stuff. Yep. He never left. He's getting to grips with the car. So it's, whilst the interview as a whole was pretty rubbish, that little soundbite was very, very good. And it's part of the reason, of course, that we love the Tommy T, isn't it? Because he is just trying to be positive all the time.
The guy's got a race win in his first year in a different car. I think that's tick. Yeah. Like, it's a weird car to drive from all accounts. Carlos has mentioned that multiple times after having moved on. He's like, it's different, isn't it? He's like, why didn't you warn me how different it was? I don't know what we're expecting other than, like, we've got a junior driver that's driven nothing else but this car doing well in it. That's weird. That's bizarre that someone that's driven it for multiple years has a better understanding of how this car is working. And all the tweaks that Daniel's making are freaking him out, and he's not liking. And all the way the car's developing next year just shows how much more versatile Daniel is and will be in that car, like Campy's mentioned. And
it's important to note, too. Andreas Seidel came out and said, when we sat down once, we was finally in a McLaren shirt. He said what he likes out of F1 cars, and everyone in the meeting would scratch their head and said, geez, what you want in an F1 car is the polar opposite to what we put on track. So, yeah, I mean, there is driving styles, but it's like trying to get in AFL comparisons, it's like trying to get a ruckman to play in the wet and pick up the ball 300 times a game. I mean, he can do it and he's capable of doing it, but it's not where he's going to flourish, right?
Not natural, yeah. And from what we understand, Daniel likes a more front end darty car like Max and Lewis which is what we know is championship winning drivers' cars. That is how it works. The other styles just don't yield championships. They might get a win here and there. They might be more consistent, but they don't net wins. And you need to drive something that far on the edge. And that is what Daniel wants. He wants a car that he can throw up the inside and brake really late on. And that's obviously one thing that he's struggled with at Renault and now at
there
McLaren.
it is.
And that is what he's looking for. And they're going, oh, that's not what we've got. We've got this kind of good all-rounder, middle of the pack kind of, and suited to these previous drivers we've had and little tweaks they've liked. It's not set up to be this absolute knife edge monster, which you need to win consistently at the front.
Do you know what I think Sky F1 is really doing poorly? That's understanding their audience. Now, I understand, of course, their British bias because they're predominantly focused on their British audience. But Drive to Survive has done two things. A, it's obviously pushed Formula One, but it's pushed Daniel Ricciardo to be everyone in the United States' and Canada's favorite, pretty much the world now as well, but the favorite Formula One driver over everybody else because of how Australian he is and of how likable he is, of course, and all that sort of other stuff. I mean, he's on podcasts like Smartless with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and it just interesting, and Sean Hayes, like that kind of vibe now is up here in terms of like this Hollywood kind of, not elite, but like very well known in popularity. Absolutely right. When you have people who are pundits on Sky F1 saying that sort of stuff, not only does it damage, of course, our thought process about how credible they are, but it also damages the brand that they've got in these other countries, especially the US, because ESPN piggyback Sky F1 like Fox Sports does here as well. And they're just like, it just to me it's not a smart business thing, Campy. Does that sound like a stupid thing to say out loud? But they're not even thinking about where they're being shown outside of the UK and going, all right, well, maybe we should strategically pick who we talk about.
Oh, look, I don't want to continually sky bash because I think the product they put out a lot of the time is 80% there in the professionalism. It's the 20% that we've seen creep in, like these old dad-like jokes and this quirky sense of humour that someone in HR is like, yeah, that's what the young kids like. They like these quirky sense of humour. And it's like, no, not really. I watched the Danny Rick race from 2014 and like, just the way that the commentators, you could notice the change and the difference from back then. Now I understand things grow and evolve, and they try and tweak it to get it right. But I'm sick of the DR bashing because like Norris ain't that good yet. He still hasn't done anything, and yeah, Daniel struggled. We all know that. I think that's the first thing people have said all year, but don't ever count that dude out because he's the only guy that's ever gone toe-to-toe and beaten Max Verstappen. And when Max gets to the end of his career and he's doing a podcast 15 years on, he's going to go, Daniel was the dude that beat me really early on when I was a young driver. He taught me a lot, showed me a lot. We pushed each other, but he got the best of me for the 2.5 years before he decided to move on to Renault. And then after that, I mean, we know about the problems DR had mechanically in that car, but Max is going to attribute a lot of his learning and being pushed by Daniel Ricciardo. So look, I think we need to keep it in perspective. And yeah, man, Herbert's comments, just a fuckwit, mate. Seriously. Sorry, James. Get your pen out. That was 14 minutes and 20.
Every time. I don't even know where my pen's gone. I didn't even prepare. I thought you were going to be good.
No, but the thing is, we're going to get to Melbourne next year if we get it. I'm still very skeptical about whether we get a race next year in Melbourne.
We'll talk about that. Be one of the
yeah, we will. But
coming up.
The proof will be in the pudding. The fans are just going to laugh at Herbert whenever they see him. So
don't they already? All right, let's talk about questions, and we'll get into it. Thank you to you for, as I said, either going to our Discord server and dropping them in the Team Radio server part there, or for sending it through on Instagram. I really appreciate it. Of course, we've got wrong answers only. Why didn't Campy do his homework? Coming up at the end of this podcast, but. Let's start with the right answer from Braced Animal. I have a question. Why didn't Campy do his homework? You had one job.
I did do my homework. These boys shafted me, and I'm calling them out. This is what I'll deal with. And we literally had a discussion before, like, oh, come on, Campy, just play your role. Come on, people who expect you not to have watched the race and been in control and don't. Bullshit. That's totally what happened.
Lots of words in other people's mouths. What a hard thing. Thanks,
the tables have turned.
How the turntables. Oh, mate. Tommy and I have carried this podcast for near on 15 years. We've had to carry the weight, and all we asked you to do was pick a race that we could watch easily, and you're like, "This is the race we're doing," and then we didn't hear boo out of you.
Watch.
Till Sunday night.
For as bad as I am about technology, I found it and I got it.
How was the race?
To be honest, the Discord found it for you. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. There's a shout out to whoever it was who said, I found it here. Here's where it was.
How was the race?
Look, maybe we need to reassess about what race we're going to do a race review on. It was awesome because Danny Rick won, but it wasn't.
Tommy T, how about you and I choose the next race, the classic race review, where we can actually watch it?
If you boys,
or on YouTube.
Yeah, there you go.
If you boys ask me for my F1 TV login, I'll tell you what, I'll be screenshotting and send it to everyone on Discord.
Yeah, you should just put it and see what happens.
No one else on the.
See how many screens can log in.
Yeah,
that'd be worth it. Let's keep going. Zach from Pennsylvania. Do any of the three of us have sim racing setups? Campy, your gaming setup is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's world class. I'll give you the hot tip. It's non-existent. I don't play computer
Campy's got
games.
The original Xbox still, and that's it.
Yeah, plays the S1.
Oh, look, I had my gaming days when I was a student for a few years and, worked one day a week and played COD for...
Did you have dreadlocks at the time?
I had.
And wear those like real hempy looking
Which socialist university did you go to?
I believe it or not, I clocked up 72 playing days on Modern Warfare 2 back in the day. So I'm not unaccustomed to being a gamer, but when I finished uni, I thought, geez, let's knock that on the head, and you got to grow up now, and I haven't played it since. So there you go.
And when are you planning on growing up? Tommy T, have you got a setup?
No, I don't. And if I can't get a good one, I won't get one. I think
I'm with you.
That's the issue. If you're going to get an entry-level one, it's useless, and you're better off with a controller or a mouse and keyboard. So if I can't spend thousands of dollars, I'm not going to spend anything and just stick to my controller, I think.
Hey, but if there was one on offer that you could pick up for a couple of grand, I'd be like, a good one, you'd probably go, I'll give this a crack.
Or I could be like old mate Rick Kelly and just build one out of timber.
Tell me you don't care about driving anymore without telling me you don't care about driving anymore. That's what that was.
In his defense, he did a ripping job. He was like, I'm not paying for it. I'm going to build it.
Yeah, and then he got all this stuff bloody given to him by Harvey Norman, didn't he?
Yeah.
There's an unintentional shout out to a company. Well, look, I'm the same as you, Tommy T. There is Alex Baxter, who listens to this podcast and who I went to school with, put me in touch with a Melbourne manufacturer of sim racing setups. The name has just escaped me, but they provide the official racing sims for the Alpine team. So shout out to a small business in Melbourne supplying the guys over in France for that. Cool. I'll find the link and I'll add it to the Discord. But if, like, in terms of your price range, boys, it's in it. But it's all Melbourne made as far as I can understand. Zach, I probably want to get a combo flight sim setup and driving setup because I have flown gliders and planes. Not that I've ever got to the point of getting my license, but I've done a lot of that sort of stuff, and I really want to get into my flight simulator at some point too.
Flight sims are cool. I'd second that.
So, I mean,
have you done a solo flight?
No, many reasons why, but the only reason is I never had my medical in time, and by the time I could get it, I had just moved on with my life. Flying's very expensive. Powered flight is very expensive. Gliding, though, there's a lot of gliding in the UK for a bit, and it was incredible. That just the best and most scary fun you can have in the air.
I did it. I did a 2-seater one in Central Otago in New Zealand
Oh.
and around Mount Cook and Lake Tekapo. And I tell you what, I didn't read the horror stories that they have with gliders in New Zealand because they're quite popular, but that was probably hands down one of the most incredible things I've ever done. It
So
was
quiet, isn't it?
Ah,
It's quieter than
That's scary
room
quiet, I
temperature it
reckon.
is, and yeah, there's nothing between you and the outside.
it was just super cool to learn about like the pressure systems in the air and how they come off mountains and up and down. You can go with it and essentially fly for hours at a time just on nothing
Yeah.
as long as you start up there. So,
Did you get towed
very
up,
cool.
or did you
Yeah,
get
towed up.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's keeping it behind an aeroplane whilst flying is an interesting vibe. But anyway, great, Zach, great question. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Adam asks, an interesting chat would be the race to 2022, i.e., who has switched off and who can't. Who? This isn't really written very well. Sorry, Adam, if I'm buggering. It's probably on me reading it. Haas never switched on, so they must be leading Williams. Can now easily Alpha, not so much. Then the big middle pack. All right. Well, let's just rephrase
who's
that
most
and say
prepared for next year?
who's just
Yeah.
switching off completely at the very back of the pack. Haas, I think, switched off before we even had any racing. Tommy T this year. Williams has obviously made some gains, I think, and Alpha's probably somewhere in the middle. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. It's so hard to tell, isn't it? Because all we're hearing is development for future. I think you'd probably put Red Bull at the back of those top teams would be one thing I've noticed. They're going pretty hard at this year. We thought Mercedes were going hard for next year, but maybe not so much. I think it's so hard to tell, isn't it, Campy?
Oh, no, you got to remember, these rules are supposed to come at the start of the year. So every team has done development on this car to a point. And then with COVID happening in Australia in 2020 and that event being cancelled, and then we didn't know it was happening with the rest of the year, when they decided to have a season last year or whatever that looked like, and then this year, they actually put a freeze on all development from last year. So every team started and got to a point. I think the proof will be in the pudding about, I mean, the honesty system was, we've got to be honest about,
That'll work.
you know, in the off season and this year, how much development they do. We know about like the restrictions on wind tunnels and stuff, but I call BS. Look, there's teams out there that have been working on this out in a factory in the middle of nowhere. Ferrari, I'm calling you out. You cheat everywhere possible, in my opinion.
Allegedly.
They've been consistently, and I think most teams would have been doing some work on the car right throughout the whole of the COVID last year and this year as well. So they've had a bit more time up their sleeve, but this honesty system and teams wouldn't be touching it for, you know, a freeze on development for 12 months. Give me a break. Oh, it's just that's F1. It just ain't going to happen.
There's no way of policing it properly, is there? Really?
Well, I mean,
that's the problem. That's why we an honesty system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting question, Adam. Sorry for misreading it, but yeah, I think Haas definitely the team who was certainly switched off. I think Red Bull definitely switched on for this year to chase this World Drivers' Championship, much like the end of the last era that we had before Turbo Hybrid. I think McLaren's probably somewhere in the mid pack. I mean, obviously the Mercedes power unit changes, Campy has said many times, has used a lot of their development tokens, but they've had a couple of tweaks to the car, which has obviously made Daniel a little more comfortable. But if I was them, I'd be putting all of their effort and attention now, going forward from now into next season. Although the championship battle for third with Ferrari is still a little bit spicy. So there is obviously some advantages to be gained there in terms of prize money. But Campy, do you think others like, you know, AlphaTauri and Alpine are sort of half-half?
Oh, no, a lot of the back market teams, particularly Alpine, I mean, with the start of the year they've had, we knew they'd be fast on some tracks, but the start of the year was rubbish. Aston Martin was rubbish too. I think they would have packed in pretty early on development for this year's car, so everything's looking forward to next year. I mean, I know most teams have already got sims set up for next year, and it's just how accurate their computer models will be lined up in the sims that they run. But we won't find that out until you get a test day, really, where they can run some cool things off the car to figure out what's real and what's not, to correlate it. But I think you'd be surprised how far along a lot of these teams really are. So
Uh, yeah, I'm so looking forward to just getting out of this era of cars, though. To be
Yep.
perfectly honest, like the racing's good, and obviously we're coming down to the wire now. But it's going to be an interesting time next year. All right, let's go to our next question. Thanks to you for that one. Mel asks, F1 dream job? Go. Campy, what is your F1 dream job?
Race director.
Race director. Ooh, interesting. Okay. I don't know
Elaborate.
how I feel about that. I mean, are you going to turn it into the Hunger Games? What's going on? Or
Hey,
Squid Game?
I haven't watched Squid Game. It just looks like the worst show of all time. doesn't it?
Classic too. You'd be the kind of person to watch it with English dubs as well.
You would, wouldn't you?
You wouldn't go OG Korean with subtitles.
Yeah.
All right, F1
What?
race director. See, look, no idea. Race director. Tommy T.
Ooh, I think I'd want to be in like the marketing department.
Okay, in the design space.
Yeah, not so much in the graphic design, but the overall creative direction. I think so much. I'm sick of looking the same old kind of F1 styled graphics. Everything's got to like be swooping and fast, and I don't know. Everything just looks like a racetrack all the time, or
Yes.
a computer game. I think we can do something different. It doesn't always have to be that same known motif, but I think there's a lot of different stuff that will happen in that space going forward. So look at what Daniel Ricciardo's like brand is bringing out. All of his merch and stuff is always interesting and different. I think that's the way F1 should go.
Absolutely.
Not just the same old, same old.
Yeah. No, I love that. There's probably no surprises here for what job I want, and that's just presenting / hosting Formula One for a weekend, not commentating.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I'd much rather do the Simon Lazenby, Will Buxton on F1 kind of vibe.
I thought you were going to be the guy with the clipboard weighing the cars. That was Marshall.
No, I want to be the guy with the clipboard weighing the drivers, pulling them away from celebrating with their teams prematurely, and go, "We need to go and stand over there on this thing. Very
You're a
important."
bigger pest than that guy.
Oh, you'd be good at that job. Oh,
Squid. Is that correct?
no. We're all squids at heart, aren't we?
But thanks, Mel.
Should we do a rip off of Squid Game with Campy?
Uh,
Genuinely would love that because you'd have absolutely no idea what was going
know
on.
what it is.
Yeah, I saw it and I was like, it
with
looks stupid.
handball and like those kind of games.
Campy's face in the little like honeycomb thing that you have to cut out.
It'd just be an oblong with a square like Bart Simpson kind of hair.
Oh,
And then you can put a beanie over the top.
Blank. I've literally got no idea what you're talking about.
We're talking gibberish to him.
Can't
Do you actually have jobs? Where do you find time to do this shit?
Get amongst pop culture, mate.
Mate, we
Be part of the
can't
community.
all be rich kids with NASCAR dads, okay?
Yeah.
This is a follow-up question from John Paul in the live stream, and he asks, have you ever thought of doing a live stream on YouTube while a race is on and trying your hand at a bit of commentary? I think I've just answered half of that question. Tommy T, would you try your hand at commentary?
I would, but I think the logistics don't make it work, do they? Because of the delay.
Yeah, well,
That's the only issue
WTF1
with it.
do try and do this, and for me, it never ever works out
Yeah.
quite so well. And
We'd love to have a crack, but I think just how do you do it? How do you delay your thing enough?
It's
How do
also-
we not get in trouble for simulcasting?
Well, there is
F1?
that. Well, I mean, and this is even delayed. Whatever we're talking now is about 2 or 3 seconds delayed to the live stream as
Yeah.
they see it. And that's part of the issue. The bigger issue, I think, is talking about Formula One in
That
a
would be great.
pre or a post tense, fine, but actually commentating, like it is, to give credit to the dad joke king himself, it is difficult to do.
Oh.
And I just don't think I'm probably very good at it. Campy, what do you think?
If you were going to do it, you'd have to set it up like Joe Rogan's Fight Companion. Not that I'm a fan of UFC, but I've listened to some of his Fight Companion podcasts where it's on in the background and they're just mates talking and shit talking when there's an eye on it and they're having conversations around. I think that's the way you got to set it up. But,
Yeah, maybe more director's commentary style.
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, if people want it, I'm happy. Like, we'll give it a try.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give it a.
Maybe
happy
do a
to-
classic race or something.
But the problem is, it's really hard doing this like on computers and looking at face to face sometimes when you're not in the same room. I think it could work, but just logistically at the moment with COVID and the way we've had to do things, it's just it ruins the vibe a bit that we have together sometimes. I think you can only do something like that in the room. So when it all goes back to normal, Fingers crossed.
Can confirm
It's-
hearing
we
Campy
can-
live
we can give it a-
nearly to death is better than separated by distance over Zoom.
Can confirm.
It's always
out of
better
10.
in the real thing.
Oh, that is so true.
Uh,
But no, I think you're right, Campy. I mean, look, I think many of our listeners would agree too that we found a good rhythm to be where we are now from a remote podcast point of view. And obviously, me moving away has made that a little harder. But even compared to the first couple of podcasts we did last year remotely, this is now flowing a lot better.
Yeah.
But even if it's just you two in a room with me remote, that still just adds a different element. Anyway, John Paul.
Yeah, it's
happy to
well
give you
when
credit.
me and Tommy did the podcast by ourselves, that was the best podcast we've ever
Best
done.
Oh,
podcast.
probably, sure. Did I
Hands
end up
down.
editing that as well, or did you edit that?
Yeah, absolutely, you did.
I didn't do it.
You had
Yeah,
man
I
for
had
it.
to listen. That's why I had to listen to you two having a crack at me and had the editorial
Yeah,
ability.
defense, we were pretty light on, I think.
Yeah,
We were tame.
Doesn't
we
stop.
treated you like the princess that you love to be treated like, Jim.
Thank you. Obviously, still looking for my rider every time I rock in. I'm like, where's where's my non-natural wine? You got natural wine? Put it in the bin. That's where it belongs.
Natural is delicious. Come on.
Mark,
What's a natural law?
that's terrible, is what it is. I think it's laziness in winemaking. Let's keep moving. Mark asks, is this a better situation for Piastri? Alpha as the second driver, knowing they have Tio Porcher in their academy, that's something Piastri isn't part of, or as a reserve driver in Alpine, holding out a year and then coming into a full-time seat in 2023 once Alonso presumably retires. We've talked a little bit about this, Mark. I think you asked this question a couple of weeks ago, so apologies it's taken a little bit to get to this. But Campy, let's start with you. What is the better situation? Is it the Alpha second driver seat for a year before Tio Porcher potentially comes in, or is it Alpine reserve with a 2023 Alpine full-time seat?
I think the Alpine seat is a better seat than the Alpha, being number two. My problem with that seat though is that is Alpine have signed off onto a long-term deal. What did he get? 4 years, and it's just like, why on earth would three? Why would you sign this guy for another 3 years? That's the issue for me. Because I don't think Alonso, if Alonso gets into a car that he likes and he's got a sniff, he's going to go back to them and go, well, why'd you bring me back at 40 for just 2 years to help develop? Like, I wanted a shot at this and now I've got a shot. And, I want to be a 3-time world drivers champion with Renault, over across a couple of decades. So I can see it going worse for Piastri if he does, if they do have a good car next year. But I think at some level we've just got to have faith in Mark Webber that he's well respected within the paddock. He's come up through the sport the hard way. He knows how the system works. He knows how managers work. I mean, he worked with Flavio. As flamboyant as Flavio could be, they're big boys with big balls, and they don't mess around when they're doing business too. So I think Mark's got that experience. He's still in contact with him, a bit of a mentor in that aspect too. So I just think we've got to trust that Webber's got Piastri in the right hands, and we will see him in F1 at some stage if he wins F2 this year. And I think he will. But I don't want to see him out of a drive for 18 months either before he steps in. I just think it could be detrimental. But he'll be fine. He's world class, that kid. So it'll work out for him.
What do you reckon, Tommy T? I mean, the likelihood, Mark Webber's even said on the F1 Nation podcast last week, the likelihood is we're not going to see Piastri in Formula One until 2023 in that Alpine seat. But if what we talked about last time with Andretti taking over Alfa Romeo, and of course the reason I think why Guan Yu Zhou hasn't been announced yet is because of that potential merger without any real American drivers ready to go, unless they bring Grosjean back from their IndyCar team into Formula One, which would be interesting and a hell of a story.
He wouldn't come back.
No, I know, but is there potential for them to go, well, we can look at bumping Logan Sargent up to F2 next year and then bringing him to F1 the year after that, which means we need, an interim driver in Oscar Piastri. Is that going to be better, or is it reserve drive?
I think they're going to look for the personality thing as well, because he does have the more happy-go-lucky style that the Americans will tend to, rather than the very serious kind of Euros. I think he's probably more approachable as the Australian, and we've seen how that's gone for Daniel. I don't know, to be honest. I think I'm with Campy. I think that Alpine seat is probably more attractive as a reserve driver, knowing that that's the academy you've been working with. You know the team. You've been in and around the factory and kind of that thing. The culture is something that you've grown up in somewhat. So I think that is probably the more attractive, even though it is not driving a car. But like Campy said, if you're in doing sim practice, you're doing all those kind of things all the time, and you're in and amongst it, I think it'll actually help way more than going somewhere completely new, different, and potentially not performing. That could be almost more dangerous than taking a year out, I think.
The other
Yeah.
thing too is the alpha seat with Valtteri there. I think that seat becomes more attractive and a better option as Valtteri is a teammate, as opposed to an Alonso or an Ocon. And you know what? If I had to put my money where my mouth is, I'd probably prefer Piastri to go and do his apprenticeship under someone like a Valtteri Bottas. So we know what Valtteri's like and what he gives us on track and how good he is. And I just think that'd be perfect for Oscar. So, I mean, there's still a chance he gets on the grid next year. I mean, it's getting slimmer and slimmer, but if Andretti buys it out, they're obviously cashed up and they're not looking for a paid driver for next year.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's where it comes in. I just I think the longer you're out of a car and not racing on a Grand Prix weekend, I mean, I've said it before, but the McLaren dude, what's his name? Jeez, I've gone
Stoffel
blank.
Van Dorn?
Stoffel. I mean, you can see it turning into that category of driver really quick if he sits out for a few years and doesn't get consistent drives in F1. But trust Mark Webber. Trust the process, I think.
It'd be interesting to see if he doesn't get the seat next year, how well Albon does in Williams, because he's probably, he's the mark, isn't he? Somewhere, but he did drive a Formula One car before. Anyway, there is no one like it. Just to follow up my own point with actually, no, that was a terrible point. Let's move on. Jim from Geelong asks, Campy, I would love a list of who is currently in the bin. Who is in the recycling bin and able to re-emerge, and who is just never coming out of the trash? Because if I could take Yuki to my local tip and put him under tons of trash, I would. Jeez, lads.
Yeah, look, Gasly's
in
just
the proper bin.
Gasly's in the bin for me.
Proper bin.
He's been in there since podcast since day one. He's my whipping boy. I've never rated him. He's getting some good results, but he's just in the bin for me, and he's not coming out.
You to meet face to face.
Massey's in the bin. Big time.
I think the Discord's been having a crack at you and saying you do realise that Michael Massey doesn't give out penalties and things like that.
Oh, what does he do? He's the
to that?
chief race director. The
Yeah, but
stewards.
he's not the steward.
He makes the calls, mate. Don't give me this crap. If he puts his foot down, then look.
That got him.
It did. It's actually broken him a little bit.
I don't know what to say to that, actually. No, he's in the bin. Fuck him. He's
not again.
He is the face of it. He is the public man. Oh, I had to think about that. He's the he's in the bin for me. He's done a terrible job since Mr. Charlie Whiting left, in my opinion.
Well, track limits is one thing that he's been useless on, hasn't he? Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's so many. Look, but he could be recycled because he's Australian, so we're loyal. But James, in saying that, really enjoyed that conversation you had with is it Scott Elkin?
Yeah.
On Extreme E. If you haven't listened to that, not that I want to, prop up Jim, but I'll tell you what, it is a cracking interview and well worth a listen. And it was, you guys were sensational too, but gave me a bit of insight into what goes on behind the closed doors and cracking podcast, sensational chat. So as to the bin, who's in the recycling bin, who can come back out? Look, I don't know. I just make this stuff up on the spot.
No.
I couldn't tell you what I said 3 weeks ago, let alone what I was thinking last Friday. And that's what you guys like. I'd sort of make it up on the spot, and there is a lot that I, genuinely say with.
Drivers, where do they sit?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue into Mr. Joel Ozindo's question, isn't it?
Yeah. All right.
Where do they sit? I very much, James, read out the question, but I very much appreciate the effort that's gone into this one because when I read it last night, I actually went. he may have a point. I have to think about this. So ask the question first, Jim, and we'll have a chat.
All right, here we go. Joel from Indonesia, probably Jakarta in Indonesia, James, you moron. I'm very interested to hear people's opinions on Lance Stroll this season. I note that there is some good-humoured sledging on the pod about him. There we go, as we know full well. If we remove the fact that Lance is a pay driver and our general bias against such drivers, what do you think of his performance? Joel has put together both Stroll and Vettel's results for 2021, and I'll read them out in just a moment. Lance beat Vettel in 10 out of 16 races. I've included Seb's disqualification in Hungary as a win for Seb over Stroll, which is fair enough too, I think. I mean, in terms of the fuel issue, that wasn't his fault. Lance's points deficit to Seb is only 9. If Lance's tyre hadn't blown up in Baku, the deficit would likely be much lower. I suppose you could also argue that if Seb wasn't disqualified in Hungary, it would be higher. I think many would agree that the best and most accurate comparison of the abilities of two drivers is if they're teammates in the same machinery. Absolutely. We still have to see what happens next year and for the rest of this season. However, at this point in 2021, Lance, a 22-year-old kid, has beaten Seb, a 4-time world champion, in 10 out of 16 races this year. In my humble opinion, in the first 16 races, I think Lance has done a pretty decent job. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think Stroll gets too much flack for being a pay driver and this causes bias against him? Or do you think it's deserved and Seb is easily a better driver than him? Look, I won't read out all the results because 10 out of 16, we can kind of know where we're going from. But if you're interested in seeing them, you can jump across to our Discord server because Joel's question is in there, as well as a bit of backwards and forwards in the general chat section where he originally posted this question, and a massive shout out to you if you put some opinion there as well. But Campy, let's start with you because it's a very well put together question, Joel. Thank you for your effort. And indeed, this is a really interesting topic, mate.
Yes, I think he's right. Look, I want to preface this by saying if you are driving F1, you are no dud. You don't buy these. It doesn't matter how much money your dad's got, how much money you've got behind you. You are not getting a drive in this car if you cannot. If you're just a Joe Blow like you and me. I mean, these guys are. I mean, Mazepin for me, he's still in the top. Half of 1% of drivers in the world. He's that good. And you just don't get to where you are without showing some talent. Stroll does cop flack for being a pay driver and his dad buying in the team. That is totally real. Is it fair? I think at times it's fair. But he, as I've said before, he used to show, not this season so much, but he's shown glimpses of putting a pole in Turkey last year in the wet, got a podium in his maiden year. He's shown glimpses. I mean, he started on the front row in Monza. He showed glimpses at least once a year where he's had this massive standout drive where he's been driving well. I think last year, the first half of last year against Checo, he was sensational, but then dropped off considerably. There were some reasons to that. The kid's got talent and he's got something. The problem is the way he's perceived in media, just because of his dad is, but he doesn't give you anything either. The guy to talk to is just like, when you can't. Like, show me something. Give me something to hang my hat on. So doing what we do where, yes, there's role-playing and we're trying to make people laugh and say funny stuff and, that's the easy joke to take about it. I think it's warranted, yes, but at times, no. As for the seasons he's had, I was surprised that he'd beaten Seb that many times. So I was surprised it was 10-6. But looking at the results, Seb struggled with his car when he first got in it. And he was saying, after a limited testing and all that stuff, having, 3 morning sessions in a test before you jump into racing in a new team's not ideal, where it has been sort of 2 weeks and unlimited laps. They were constricted this year, but it seems to me like he had 4 really poor races at the start of the year, and then you hit hit Monaco. He put it together in Monaco and he went on a tear. I think he went 5th in Monaco and then he got his second the week after. I think he got a 7th race and he beat Stroll, 3 times on the trot. So I think if you take the first 4 races out, brings it back to a pretty comparable season. The difference between the two this year has been, the top fives that Seb's getting. I think he's got 5. I mean, I know he got DQ'd in one, but we'll include that in there. So when there is performance in the car on tracks where the car can exceed and get good points, that's where Seb is doing better than Lance. Whereas Lance, he's actually been pretty consistent overall, but he's not getting those top 5s. I think his best finishing position 7th for the whole year. So it's an interesting point, but
Is he frozen?
I think we just lost him.
He's done. His eyes have rolled back in his head.
comes from.
There we go. Campy, sorry, mate. We lost you there for a moment. And you also froze with your eyes seemingly rolling into the back of your head. But yeah, so sorry, just to summate one more time, mate. Your overall your summation point, the thought of Lance overall.
Oh, right. So Lance overall this year, Seb's got the top 5s, and Lance has struggled at times to get the best out of the car when the car is performing. He's been somewhat consistent in the sense that when he's getting points, he's in that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. And I think that's where the comparison comes for us, because they are a team that we don't follow religiously. It's like when we watch a race, we're watching Danny Rick, and we're constantly looking at the timings to the drivers ahead, how he's going, how he's tracking. There's some drivers and some teams that, like Aston Martin this year, who aren't factoring into a lot of our watching. So I think that's where the perception comes that Seb's not doing well. But if you take those first 4 races out, it's pretty comparative.
Well, so my thoughts are, I think when you look at the qualifying, it's completely flipped. It's the other way. It's 7-4 in qualifying in Seb's fashion. And I think this comes down to a lot of the race results, is that Stroll is just doing the alternate strategy, racing against back markers with no real risk, and if it comes off, it comes off. Whereas Seb's qualifying in the meat of that mid-pack and actually having to run that race against those guys and cover people off and do all those things. He doesn't have the luxury of doing a random strategy and running his own race. He's literally in the thick of it, whereas Stroll's coming from behind, nothing to lose. So he's only got
with tire choice,
take all those risks and do something a bit different. Exactly, and he can do all those things. Whereas I think that'd be the story I'd look at, is to look at the qualifyings and how many times Stroll has missed out on a whole queue, basically, compared to his teammate, where the other one's gone through. That would be interesting to me. So who got out of Q3, who got out of Q2, who got into do you know what I mean? And who actually got through and was actually fighting against the middle of the mid-pack, not at the back, and basically just fending off those back marker cars. Because I think that's where it comes down. And we saw Checo be incredible at that in that car, when he would make the best out of all those rubbish situations where he qualified. I think that is a lot of the reason why he's got all these consistent kind of 8th, 7th, kind of like in the points stuff from Stroll, but nothing even higher up than that.
Spectacular, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's had nothing kind of grand, whereas you've had Seb get second twice, one of them taken away, because he's actually fighting those fights in qualifying and then in the race if it comes off. Sometimes it doesn't, because that car just isn't up to scratch. But if it's coming from the back with a bunch of downforce bolted on to overtake cars because you've got nothing to lose, completely different than actually trying to maintain track position, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Tommy Z, and certainly worth remembering too of how strategy plays out, and issues that cars can have. And we know Seb is very good at having issues with his car, but certainly Lance generally is racing his own race and either is lucky with a safety car, as you say, does the alternate strategy, and I'll put it later. Look, I think from my point of view, as you very rightly say, Campy, even people like Nikita Mazepin, they're not just here because they put money into the team. They've clearly been able to drive other Formula cars for a period of time to get into this seat. And as much as we rag on all of them, none of us have any understanding of what it is like to drive a Formula One car. Not even close. Not even close.
Not even a race car.
Exactly. Not as good as Tommy T is at go-karts, and he's better than both of us. That was the last time. We'll do that at the beginning of next year, mate, just to have I'm going to go get some training. Anyway, but we don't know. Obviously, armchair experts for sure. But Stroll, though, has the ability, and he did pretty well in F2 or GP2, whatever it was called back in the day. And he's had some good results in a car that was effectively a Mercedes. So look, the guy
Yeah.
can drive. He went from 1 in 5 now to being pretty rubbish, and maybe that's a reflection of how the car is performing versus his actual level of performance, especially with teams like McLaren and Ferrari now stepping it up a lot higher than they were last year in comparison to the pink Mercedes. But yeah, it's a really interesting point. Look, if you want to contribute to this part of the conversation, please go to our Discord on our general chat. Joel's question is in there. You'll be able to find it. But Joel, a massive thank you to you. You have consistently asked really, really good questions. There's another question in here that we will get to in a different podcast because it will take just as long. But it's a very, very good one as well, mate. So thank you for sending that through. Let's move on. Aaron asks, at the end of 2019, Max said he reckons 60% of the field would win the world championship in the Mercedes of that year. Who do you boys reckon could win a championship from the current drivers with machinery as much better than the competition as it was last year / the year before? Who do we reckon?
60% about right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I'm trying to think who wouldn't. That's probably an easy question.
Yeah, just pick the 40%.
I don't think Nick,
Yuki wouldn't.
Yuki is straight there.
Nick,
I love it.
Yuki, and Mazepin. I don't think they're there.
Mhm.
I don't
So
think
the rookies
Giovinazzi's
are
there.
Yep.
I don't think he'd win. I don't think Kimmy's still got it, unfortunately. In the best machinery, I don't know if he's got championship winning still.
It depends who the teammate is, right? So
Yeah,
who's the teammate?
interesting.
But let's just on the proviso that you'd beat your teammate.
I think George
Would, he'd win it.
would do well. I don't think Latifi would, as much as we like the nicest Canadian ever.
That's a strong list. That's strong competition.
I think Alonso definitely.
Yeah, I think
He's still a weapon. I think Seb's still got it. I don't think
wouldn't.
Ocon. No.
I think you're right, though. 60
I don't think Lando would win either.
Yeah, there it is.
I think Sainz or Leclerc would be great. I think both the Mercedes current drivers would be great. And I think both Red Bull drivers would be great. Checo would be interesting. He's probably on the fence, really, because we haven't seen him put it together in a top car. So,
well, we know what he can do.
He can't qualify well enough, even if he's got the best car.
We know what he can do in a 2020 Mercedes with a different paint on it. So I would suggest that he would probably have a good crack at it as well. And don't forget his junior years running around the McLaren was unfortunate timing for him, but he's very good at putting it where it needs to be.
Obviously, Daniel.
Obviously.
It's
very fair points. Very fair point.
But I think it's always about 60%. These drivers are championship capable winning
Got to be, right?
They have to be. I think, and if you're not, you kind of your role, which is still elite and world class, but you don't have that next level of like I will always beat the 10 other people around me.
You have to get into that attitude of like in Magnussen and Grosjean from last year. In fact, it was almost Perez of last year until he got this Red Bull contract after the last race.
Yep.
I mean, he's a guy who was never going into a top team again, had his opportunity with McLaren back in the day, but that is a very rare opportunity. You think about people like Marcus Ericsson, Stoffel Van Dorn. I'm just thinking in recent history here as well. Magnussen and Grosjean, those guys just haven't been able to break out of the bubble they're in. And you either got to enjoy the racing for what it is, or you got to and accept the fact you're never going to win either a race or a driver's championship. And it's got to be hard when you're, at this level wanting to push as hard all the time. So, I think Kevin Magnussen would have probably been part of the crew that would have won the championship.
I'd put him in that too. I mean, look at his for his drive at McLaren on debut. Put it on podium. No testing.
17 times out of 10, wouldn't he, Tommy T?
Pierre Gasly would
from the bin.
walk away that championship.
He'd have the bin on the top of the
W19. Don't. Jeez.
Yeah. No, great question, Aaron. Thanks for that. That was good.
So does that diminish Lewis's, GOAT status?
But I think because I think Lewis would win in the third best car sometimes. You know what I mean? He's that good.
Yeah. I think we forget about his McLaren drive, his first drivers' championship. Like that was, and even you mentioned this in Turkey for his GP2 win in Turkey back in the day.
Unbelievable.
You want to watch a masterclass? The guy, and look, I mean, we can talk about it for years about best car and it's Lewis Hamilton and stuff. Yeah, I think lots of drivers would have the same opportunity at winning if given the same car. All right, let's keep going. Nick from Melbourne. This is a great question, Nick, and it's backed up by Tanner from Dallas. What's Campy's recipe for humble pie? Campy?
Just try and
Have you
stay humble, I suppose.
Have you ever baked anything in your life, mate?
Yeah.
Oh, this would be
Yeah, I'm good. I do a mean oysters Kilpatrick, which is not bad.
baking.
That's not
Isn't
baking.
it?
I'm talking
Baking.
about
Nah, look.
flour and sugar.
Oh, can we please get Campy on like a Great Australian Bake Off? Oh, that is
Celebrity, like that D, F grade celebrity.
James, guess what we're
list.
doing when you come down? We're going to do a Bake Off.
Mate, I've
That is
survived.
content.
That
Look,
is great
boys,
content.
I've survived for 3 weeks on my own in the Victorian
Courtesy of
High
the
Country.
7-Eleven of sandwiches, I reckon.
Oh, bloody hell.
Couple of 4 and 20s in the freezer.
Oh.
Sweet, eh, mate?
Oh,
Oh, living
just
off purely
typecasting
4
you
and
now?
20s
Oh.
and a 6-pack of VB stuff.
Jeez.
Green Demons, that's all you need, eh, Campy?
there's always a few of those going.
You can look, guys. If you join us next year, we'll talk about this next question. But if we end up having a race in Melbourne and we join us next year, we can guarantee that there will just be keg after keg after keg of beer that Campy will only drink, and that is Victoria Bitter and Melbourne Bitter if he's feeling a bit fancy.
I just don't like all that fruity shit that you boys drink. Taste what I imagine feet would taste like if you cooked up feet.
What?
It's all got that. Oh, no.
Oh,
Just foul.
let's keep going. Imagine what feet would taste like. What a kind of sentence is that? Oh, all right. Let's go. Dale from Alberta. Great to have you listening, Dale. Thank you for this question. And we have a little bit more to talk about this now. But Dale says, I've heard your Prime Minister suggest that international travel to Australia will resume in November. Should we be optimistic that the Australian Grand Prix will go ahead next year? Harry T, part of his question is, what are our chances of actually having the Grand Prix in Melbourne? Now, boys, we've moved to 3rd on the calendar, which gives us a little bit more time, of course, to sort some stuff out. We know, at least from a New South Wales point of view, from my point of view, I can, in fact, leave the country the 1st of next month and come back again without having to quarantine, which is bloody fantastic. Australia's decided, or at least this state's decided to reconnect with the world. But I'm still a little hesitant for our race in Victoria. Tommy T, let's start with you before
It's not going to
Campy
happen.
goes. You
It's
don't
not
think
gonna
so?
happen, is it? No, I don't think so. I think this government is not looking internationally right now. They're saying all the right things and they're kind of getting forced their hand by the federal government, if anything. But I have no confidence in that happening. We haven't had our own major sporting events in this state, let alone international ones. So I just don't have the confidence. I'll be happily surprised if it does, but I think there's far too many things that have to go right in an exact order and time frame that F1's not going to risk it, and they're going to pull the pin sooner than later and go, it's too far to commit to coming for you to turn around and shut it down. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. If it was in Europe, different, because they can change that somewhat over a short period of time. Getting stuff to Australia is so much harder than you realise for F1 teams, and it is a big commitment. It's months and months of planning ahead to get them here in time for a weekend, and then send it on back again to go to somewhere like Coda or Canada or these other like non-European based races. So it's one of those things that is just going to, the decision has to be made sooner than later, and I don't think the Victorian government's in a position anytime soon.
Yeah, the calendar suggests that it's supposed to be going from 2 Middle Eastern races, you say, Tommy T, getting stuff sent over is very difficult. And then it will go to here in Australia on the 10th of April, and then it's going to Imola on the 24th of April, and then Miami. So they've almost, it's funny that they're doing Imola as the 4th race. They're almost sort of positioning themselves to potentially take another European race just in case. But look, we obviously don't want to be too down about this. We want the race, absolutely. We just have very little confidence in its ability to do it. And everyone's running around here in Australia at the moment going, it's confirmed, we're going to get the 3rd race. But it's like, guys, we had this year we had a race confirmed up until the point where we didn't. Campy, what are your thoughts?
Oh, look, you got to remember our national government is not the same as our state government, and this state government does what it wants when it wants without fear of retribution, oversight, or anything, because everyone's in their pocket anyway. So, in saying that, we've got some friends, James, that work in and around some political organisations. So I've got some insight into that. A Zoom call with a politician last week. I believe he's the deputy opposition leader in Victoria. I can't remember his name, but he's the shadow minister for major events. And he alluded to the fact on this Zoom call that in his conversations with the F1 organisation, their reaction to the way the Victorian government has handled the whole situation over the last 2 years was an absolute shit show, and it was total dictatorship, not willing to work, not willing to compromise on absolutely anything for an international sport. And he said he said it left a bad taste in his mouth about the way that it had been handled at a governmental level, and basically blew the F1 organisation off. So it wouldn't surprise me moving forward if heads of F1 just said, "Oh, well, we love Australia. We want to keep going. It's important to be there, but hey, get rid of Melbourne and move on." So I think we'll get a couple of Grand Prix before that happens, but there's going to have to be a change of, let's just say, a change of leadership somewhere to guarantee this race in Melbourne for a long time, I think. Yeah, it'll be a shame if we lose it in Melbourne, but, as a business and a multinational organisation like F1, I mean, they're smart boys. They want to work with people, and if they're getting dictated to by, a bunch of bureaucrats that are telling the corruption line, then, hey, that's sort of what it is.
Steen has a follow-up question saying, if Melbourne is no good, what are the chances of F1 at Bathurst? I know the answer is there is no chance.
Zero.
It is. I don't know if it's an FIA Grade 1 track. I know
It's
obviously GT cars go there, so it's Grade 2. But I suppose that opens up another question then, and a follow-on probably from me, which is there really needs to be more than one Grade 1 track in this country, boys.
There's not even one in New Zealand. They've only got a Grade 2
Well,
too.
what about that Brands Hatch? Well, no, not Brand. What's the one in Adelaide called?
Brands Hatch in Adelaide.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, I know that. That's why I stopped myself. It's called some weird name.
It's
Tailem Bend.
No, it's a Grade 2, I think.
Is that a Grade 2?
There's no other Grade 1.
Look, our tracks are catered for V8 supercars, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Bathurst would be great.
Stuff so much more than just the tracks. It's the facilities and things that they have to provide for F1.
My point is, though, boys, we need more. We need more than one option. So if something like this happens, that we have the ability to pull it into a different area of the country. I agree, New Zealand would be great to have a Grade 1 track as well. Yep. But yeah, for Melbourne to be the only Grade 1 track, and really it's a park. Well, it's Lakeside Drive for most of the time. You can play golf or do whatever on it. It's not a specific racetrack all the time. There's certainly the ability to do more. Hopefully with, like Ferrari Academy being up here in Sydney, that brings a little bit more attention to that fact, and potentially Motorsport Australia can get in someone's ear. And if it's the Bend, great. Let's do it. Let's just have something that's an alternate option to Melbourne. In
saying that, though, like, what makes Melbourne great for the people that live here, which is entrenched in our DNA, is we are a sporting city. We've got we've got 10 professional AFL teams. We've got professional rugby league, union, all the netball styling. We've got 2 of everything, cricket. And then we got the seasonal stuff like the Oz Open start of the year. We got the Grand Prix. We got the MotoGP in Phillip Island. We've got a spring carnival that's coming upon us, which is horse racing, which I don't particularly love. But entrenched in what we do is sport. And if you look at the participation just in sporting clubs and the percentage, it's something ridiculous. Like 83% of families with children under 18 have some sort of connection to a sporting club in Australia, in Victoria. And, it's what we're built on. It's in our DNA. And for us to have the Grand Prix is a privilege and it is an honour. It does many great things for this city, and to lose it and to handle it the way it's been handled is, what we've dealt with has been tough for everybody in the world, but for to be handled the way it has been handled, particularly behind closed doors, in a world that's made everything work and tried to adjust. It's a real shame that Victoria will probably lose this, at the next contract negotiation for the race. So
It's disappointing.
It is
It is.
disappointing. It
on a
is.
sad note.
It is disappointing. Well, let's leave it there for the questions. Thank you to you for sending them in. We've got heaps more to get through, which is
I'm ready
great.
for my favourite part.
Which is great. So look, favorite part, and then we'll talk about what we can expect ahead of the US Grand Prix in only a couple of days' time. But here is your wrong answers only as to why Campy didn't do his homework. Mark says he left it up to the Ferrari pit wall. Craig said he was busy with his other job, president of the Dan Andrews fan club. Jamie said had to go fix his bin. It's been overworked. That's true. Thomas said being a Sparky, he was probably too busy deciding what colour to order his McLaren Speedtail in.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Darren says a headache, which is probably more true. Hillary said his beanie got lost and he got stuck in the bin. Thanks, Hillary, for the double answer. That was great. Glenn says he is writing the upcoming Dan Andrews biography, fanboying so much he lost track of time. Harry said he got lost inside the back of his troopy, and Yoni Zal said RM Williams was having a his and hers sale. That's really, really great.
Very good.
Love that. Well done. Well, boys, a quick word as to what we can expect at COTA, the US Grand Prix. Tommy T, what do you think? Who do you think is going to win it, and what do you think Daniel Ricciardo's chances of getting a podium are?
I think it's going to be Red Bull heavy. I don't know. I've got a hunch. I think it was a Merc track back in the day, but I think we've seen them kind of swap a little bit over these last couple of races. So I think it'll be Maximus with the win. I think we'll see a McLaren, hopefully both, get above fifth. I'm thinking
Above fifth.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Campy?
I think all the talk will be about how bumpy this track is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
99% of what we hear, oh, this is too bumpy, too bumpy, too bumpy.
Do like a bingo card to see how many drivers say it.
That's a good drinking game.
6 a.m. espresso shot drinking game. That'll really mess you up for the rest of the day. You're like, oh, I don't know what I can do for work today.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's going to be a great weekend of sport. Of course, on our sister podcast, on the MotoGP podcast, we've got Misano Take Two. It's Valentino Rossi's final race there, of course, not the final race of his career just yet, but it is his farewell race. That's going to be interesting. And of course, as Campy mentioned, I do the Extreme E podcast. There is the Extreme E Island X Pre. If you so wish to listen to that podcast.
Great podcast off track. Go listen to it.
I genuinely
it is genuinely it's a cracking podcast too. So.
And can I just say it with the announcement of the Jurassic X Pre at the end of the year along the Jurassic coastline in the UK, and my ability to leave the country, you may well see me on a broadcast for Extreme E this year. Who knows?
That's good.
Carlos Senior for us.
So, what can I do to Carlos Senior?
Give him a big smooch.
I'll give, mate. What a dude! Just the whole. If you haven't watched Extreme E yet, just the whole driver lineup is mega. I will be among a lot of driver royalty in every category thinkable there. That's for sure. Hey, look, if you've been watching along on YouTube, thanks so much for your company. Make sure you subscribe and like the video too. It all helps the algorithm. And a massive shout out to our Discord as well, lads. Thank you so much for your time, Campy. Look, this, even though you didn't do your homework, this ended up being a magnificent podcast.
No detention for you.
No detention for you for this time. You are close to being suspended, though, for me having to go through an edit twice. But look, we really appreciate you. Thanks so much for listening and watching. And we will be live at 10:30 on Sunday morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Time. There will be 4 of us doing a pre-drinks podcast, a very special guest joining us for that one too. But until then, it is time to say goodbye, lads. We'll see you very soon.
Cheers.
And chat, a massive thank you to you two for hanging around. We appreciate it's a slightly longer podcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. As I said, please make sure you like the video as well as subscribing to the channel. It makes a huge difference. Boys, see you very soon.
It's good considering it was like thrown together. We're
Bit of a
alright
thrown
on
together.
freestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say
Imagine
bye,
if we-
Campy.
Bye.
Bye. Say it.
No.